Hello, 6th grade. Decided to make the video today in front of my tree. It's Friday afternoon for me, so good afternoon. It's Monday, who knows when for y'all, but here's kind of the week. Okay, first of all, we're on 9.3. Louisiana Purchase. Title 9.3, sorry, we're on 9.4. From the Gulf of Mexico to the Rocky Mountains. So we're moving on west. The city of New Orleans, which guards the mouth of the Mississippi River, was a part of the Louisiana Territory. This land had belonged to Spain, but Spain had given it over to France. Thomas Jefferson, our third president, offered the French ruler Napoleon Bonaparte $2 million for the city of New Orleans. Now, there's a lot of back history here, and like I said, the 6th grade book gives you like a little tiny paragraph on it, and there's a whole lot more that goes on here. First of all, you got to know a little bit about French history. We talked about it some last year. We'll talk about it more next year. But Napoleon Bonaparte was a French dictator who wanted to take over the world. But to take over the world, he needed money. Battles, stuff like that takes money, especially when it comes to taking on England. And so he'd taken over big chunks of Europe, was wanting to go to battle with England. He knew there's no way he could do that. He needed money. And ultimately, he wanted to take over the New World, take over America as well. But for right now, he was just focused on Europe. So as much as he hated to have to give up anything, he's like, if I can get rid of what's in the New World, I'm going to have more money and more energy to focus on taking over Europe. The United States really, really wanted the city of New Orleans. That's all we were really going for, was the city of New Orleans, because the Mississippi River dumps into the Gulf of Mexico. And so a lot of different rivers go into the Mississippi, including like the Ohio River. So goods could go from a lot of places in Kentucky, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, lots of different states up there, down the Ohio River to the Mississippi, down the Mississippi to the Gulf of Mexico. But not if we don't have control of the city of New Orleans, which is the city right there at the end of the Mississippi River where it dumps into the Gulf of Mexico. So we're like, okay, we need to get New Orleans from France. So Jefferson sends some people over. Let's make a deal, see if we can buy New Orleans from France. Napoleon Bonaparte's like, yes. They want to buy some land. They don't give me money, give me ability to focus over here in Europe with my conquest. So we go to ask for New Orleans, and he sells us this huge chunk of land, which it doesn't tell you in this book, but we end up getting it for 4 cents an acre. Dirt cheap. Even at that time, that would have been dirt cheap. We're talking huge seal. And the Louisiana Purchase more than doubles the size of the United States. You can see that on page 161. Just how big Louisiana Purchase is. So, I mean, this is major deal here. We go to buy a city and end up doubling the size of the United States. But now we got this land, so now it's like, okay, now what? So we got to send out some people to explore it, to tell us what's going on with this land. So, of course, you got Lewis and Clark. I know you all have heard about Lewis and Clark and Sacagawea before. This one doesn't mention Zebulon Pike, who explores the southern half. That's 8th grade. You'll learn about him in 8th grade. And as I said, this one shoves a whole bunch of stuff together. So we go straight from talking about Louisiana Purchase in 1803 to 1812. Napoleon Bonaparte is trying to control all of Europe. Although America lay across the ocean from Europe, she became involved in a war between France and England. Because what was happening was France and England were fighting with each other. And they both are like, come on, America, we need you on our side. Well, we're stuck. We're like, okay, first of all, the French helped us to win the Revolutionary War. So maybe we should go help the French. But England's always been our ally, and most of us a lot of us could trace our heritage back to England. So maybe we should help the English. But then there's also the fact that we're this itty-bitty baby country. We're not that strong. We don't have that strong of an army, that strong of a navy. So really we should just stay out of it, which is what we ended up wanting to do, is just stay out of it. We don't want to take either side, number one. And number two, we don't think we're strong enough to do anything. So we're just like, we just want to stay out of this. France and England didn't like that. If we were trying to trade with England, France would bomb our ships. If we were trying to trade with France, England would bomb our ships. And then we don't look that different from the English. We don't speak that different or sound that different from the English. So English people, English sailors would come on American ships and say, oh, that guy right there, he's actually an English sailor who's trying to sneak and desert the English Navy. He wouldn't be. He'd be an American. But there was no way to prove it, so they were taking our sailors. And then you also have the issue of the fact of the Indians. We can't prove it, but we're pretty sure that English were coming down from Canada and getting the Canadians all ticked off. Getting the English ticked off, and that giving them supplies to raid our northern area. So all of this together gets us mad, and we finally end up going to war. The U.S. ends up declaring war on England in 1812. The War of 1812, fought between the Americans and British, lasted for over 2 years. Now, the interesting thing about it, actually, there's a lot of interesting things that happened during this time. First of all, First of all, there was the burning of the White House. In 1814, the British marched into Washington, where they burned the new Capitol building and the White House. And the hero of the day actually ended up being the First Lady, Dolly Madison, who ended up saving a lot of government papers and a portrait of George Washington. Then from there, they were planning on heading to Baltimore and trying to capture Baltimore. Francis Scott Key was on a ship outside of Baltimore watching the battle taking place at Fort McHenry. And while I was watching that take place, that's where he wrote the Star-Spangled Banner, which becomes our national anthem. The most interesting thing of all of this, though, is at the Christmas Eve, I'm pretty sure, 1814. Anyway, in 1814, the Treaty of Ghent officially ended the war. Pretty sure it was Christmas Eve that the Treaty of Ghent was signed, officially ending the war. But the Treaty of Ghent was signed in Ghent, in Europe, and the message didn't make it over here to the United States, much less to the southern part of the United States, until much later, because this is back in the day. There in 1814, there was no email, there was no snail mail even. There was no way of getting information quickly from one place to the other. So the troops didn't know that the battle was over. They ended up continuing fighting, and the Battle of New Orleans, which is one of the most famous battles under the leadership of Andrew Jackson, actually ended up taking place after the war was over. Then we claim Florida, moving on to continuing this hodgepodge of piecing our country together. Although Spain had owned Florida for a long time, it hadn't ruled the land well. James Monroe convinced Spain to turn Florida over to the U.S. In return, the U.S. government agreed to pay $5 million in claims, which Spain owed U.S. citizens for damage to property. The Spanish in Florida had attacked settlers in Georgia and Alabama, causing damage to homes and farms. The same treaty, signed in 1819, settled the boundary of the Louisiana Territory between the Spanish and Mexican territories. The United States, as we know it, is beginning to come together like a puzzle. Then it goes on to talk about Alamo. I thought we'd already no, sorry, I'm getting 8th and 6th grade confused. I'm like, we talked about the Alamo. That's the 8th grade that's talked about Alamo. Then we go on to talk about 1821, with Mexico fighting and winning her independence. About Santa Anna, the dictator that comes in and takes complete control of Mexico. The Alamo, the fact, which at that time, this doesn't talk about the fact that Texas is its own state for a short time. Yes, it does. Texas is its own country for a short amount of time until it becomes the 28th state. When Texas became a state, Mexico became bitter toward the U.S., and a quarrel arose over the boundary line that separated Texas from Mexico. Texas claimed the Rio Grande as her western boundary, while Mexico claimed another boundary that gave Texas less land. Under President James K. Polk, he sends General Zachary Taylor, who will become another president. Like I said, a lot of our military leaders at this time go on to become presidents down there. And so you can read on the rest of the war with Mexico until we finally get the land known as the Mexican Cession. Then 5 years later, we get the Gadsden Purchase. And so you can see there on page 164, the United States minus Hawaii and Alaska as we think of it right now, with all of its different pieces and parts put together. So, homework for tonight. You will do Simple Solutions 67. You'll read all of 9.4. I just kind of hodgepodged over it. You will do Skill Sheet 30. Yeah, Skill Sheet 30, which is where you're just going to label all of these different, basically it's this map right here. You're going to label it on Skill Sheet 30. Be sure when you're doing Skill Sheet 30, of course you have Oregon country and you're going to give me the date. You're going to give me Mexican Cession the date, Gadsden Purchase the date. But then don't forget there's some things that don't have a name, but they have a date. So don't forget to put those dates on there, like up here in Maine. There's a date right there. It doesn't have a name, but you still need to put the date on the top part of Maine, as far as when we got that. And then up here, kind of this little purple notchy thing up here. So do not forget to do Skill Sheet 30. And I will see you tomorrow.